Hello and welcome back to Parley, the show where you folks support the other stuff I make by paying me monthly to talk about the topic of your choice. And this month, Yatogami has requested the special paper 6 from the Examination Council of Zambia. You said, answer these 3 questions in as much time as you feel is required. My own responses will be given below. Cool. We have 15 minutes, it says on the paper, so I'll stick to 15 minutes for all of my answers, but I'll pause the clock when I'm not answering. How about that? So once I read the first question, the timer will start, and I'll pause this timer on my phone when we're done. Why not? It'll be more fun this way. The paper says, answer all questions. Do not turn this paper in until you're told to do so. Never. Each question carries 10 marks. I guess I get 10 points for each question I do get right. I don't know. So let's begin, shall we? Black is a color, and white is also a color, but black and white television is not a color television. Discuss. Worth 10 marks. Okay. Yeah, so this is not going to be as straightforward as maybe you thought. You thought this was going to be simple questions. No, my first reaction is there's no point in answering this question. Why are you asking this question? This is more like a meta or personality test kind of question. How you react to being asked this question says a lot about you. There will be some people who'll say, wait, but that just makes no sense. It's like, yes, obviously, but what do we do about that? Like, where are we going from here? Black is a color and white is also a color. Now, I'm not sure I agree with that. Black is absorbing all colors and white is reflecting all colors. Colloquially, black and white are colors. It's not helpful to say that, like, but technically they're not, whatever. That's not useful. But I mean, there isn't really a conflict here. Color television just means something different than, it means like spectrum of colors television, and color means both like, a specific wavelength of light and also like a more colloquial version of the word color. I don't know. It doesn't matter. And so, of course, that's fine. I would resolve the difference that way. Like, it's a confusion of terms. It's important not to get hung up in definitions. But if you want to be a real guy, let's get down to business. How do we actually answer this question? Well, you could say that the point is just to resolve the paradox, but I think there is something further going on here. At the bottom of the paper, it says, you are free to use a calculator. What could this mean? And I think that this is the type of question where it's like there's no indication of when to stop or what the right answer is. So it's sort of testing, do you feel like you need to do more work? Do you feel like your answer needs to be more right? No, I don't. That's not going to work on me, baby. But yeah, I don't think there's really much of a conflict with the black and white thing. That being said, there is something to be said about the nuance in color television. Black and white television not being considered color television. It does necessitate some different choices. Costuming needs to be different because certain characters won't be as clearly defined by what they're wearing. There's a phenomenon in a lot of media where characters kind of get color coded. Their color of hair, for example, or their color of clothing is used to say a lot about them, rather than the type of clothing. That takes more work, after all. It's more character design work. You could argue that's not necessarily a benefit. There is something implied by a medium that is mostly black and white. But I digress. I do think it's not as simple as black and white television lacks color, so it's an absence of something. There is maybe something gained by that restriction. But I also think that it may be unhelpful in this context to treat black as a color and white as a color. It's kind of different. I'm going to pause, and we're going to read what Yatogami wrote for this one. Yatogami says, color is the perceptual property of emitted or reflected light interacting with the eyes. An object that reflects all light into the eyes has a distinct appearance termed white. An object that absorbs all light has a distinct appearance called black. These distinct appearances are collectively known as colors. That's a reasonable definition. The purpose of television is to transmit images and sound, and the original televisions could only produce the colors black and white. When televisions were developed that could show other colors, only then were the original televisions turned black and white to distinguish them from newer, more capable televisions. This sense of black and white is distinct from the perceptual properties black and white. As they apply to different subjects, they do not contradict. A different approach. You simply took another road to the same thing. Indeed, a good point I didn't make, that televisions are not really black and white televisions as much as a black and white television is a black and white television. It's not exactly not color television. That's a distinction that came about with the advent of more capable televisions. I think that's a great way to say it. Cool. It's fun that we both kind of approached explaining that there really isn't a contradiction here. It's a confusion of terms in different directions. That's fun. Timer back on as we read question number 2. If soap and water makes the body clean, then what makes the towel dirty after a bath? Discuss. 10 marks. Well, again, these are just confusions of terms. But I think it's a bit different. This one is more about relativity. Soap and water makes the body clean, and nothing is ever completely some relative term like clean, you would argue. The body becomes cleaner, of course. The towel is dirtier, of course. You're not scouring all matter from your body. So compared to when your towel had none of your body on it, I don't know. It now has some, have you become completely sterile? Even then, it would probably get some fleck of skin on it. You could answer this any number of ways. It's not actually that healthy to vigorously clean your body. Absolutely, to the extent where no oil, for example, would come off. Perfectly healthy humans lose small amounts of body hair when drying off. That's just normal. That's perfectly fine. It's relative. It's not that those terms don't mean those things, but that those terms are used casually to mean more colloquial things. Clean is within reason, of course. Not all water is completely clean or pure, but we accept that it is safe enough to drink or eat. This is perfectly common. Clean hardly ever means like 100% scoured. That's just not normal. And the towel is also not only dirty. The towel is simply not as in the same state as it was before. Having some soap and some oil from the body in the towel, sure, yes. But also the towel drying in a different way does cause it to feel different, feel coarser in some way. It might simply dry in a different pattern. You know how if you like brush a rug or a cat, so their hairs go, the other way versus one way. It's just different. Like it just looks different too. And that can feel or seem less clean. It's really just more something. It's not really unclean, right? So far, these are easy. We're scoring tons of points. I will pause the timer and read what Yatogami wrote. Yatogami says, dead skin, dust, and any leftover soap can rub up onto the towel. Bacteria and other germs thus transmitted can multiply on the moist towel. Another good point. Having a little bit of soil on the towel, however minor, does give the bacteria something to do the thing with, which doesn't really make the towel dirty, like filthy, colloquially. It just makes it dirtier than it was, I would argue. Very simple. Okay. Special paper 6. Come on, this is a cakewalk. But now we have to face the final boss of special paper 6. The third question. Can you trust a nurse whose husband sells coffins? Discuss. 10 marks. Now, the wary among you, here we go. You're playing your hand, test of mine. Now, again, I think that the interpretation here is there's something meta going on. It says a lot about you how you answer these questions. I think it's really interesting that Yatogami, you had a response that was really long to question 1, but very short to question 2, when personally I consider them to be, this is a little weird maybe to say, but intellectually equivalent. is what I'm going to say. But this one is different. That's how I feel. And your answer is a medium length, I see in the spoiler. So we'll look forward to reading that. Um, folks, we have 8 minutes left to complete this question, so plenty of time. We'll take our time. What's your game here, Examination Council of Zambia? Special Paper 6, what tricks are you up to here? We're free to use a calculator. Shall we calculate the economics of the husband's coffin selling business? No. A nurse whose husband sells coffins. Obviously, the implication is that there's a conflict of interest. The nurse benefits from the husband, you know, having coffins to sell because people die, of course. And now that already we're into the sticks. Do I think most humans have the conscience to kill people to profit a little more? Do people selling coffins, is coffin selling such an unstable industry that it really matters whether you, this is where the calculator comes in. Like if you're in a community small enough that you make meaningfully more money by one nurse like acting a different way, you can't afford to get those people killed. Your village is too small, you know? So logistically, I think like it's economically not very sound, right? That would be the end of that world, that part of that society. And it would make it irrelevant to profit that way unless you were planning to move to the next town. How long have I known this husband for, after all? So no. And do most people's consciousness is really, really work that way? Are they willing to, do they have the, I'm not trying to say it's a good thing, but the evil resolve to kill people to make some more money from their coffin selling business? No, I don't think. Would this be undetectable or subtle in a way where you wouldn't just get arrested? No, like you would definitely get caught. I think the correlation is very clear. On the contrary, I think most detective work is overly simplified and only uses probable cause as a way to like figure out who did things because we just don't know most of the time. So if there's probable cause and there's no other explanation, like you nailed it, you know, they gotcha. I don't know. I think this is fine. And again, I think that in a large environment, coffins, these are something you need, not something you want. I'm not sure it's necessary with sufficient clientele if you should be running a coffin selling business to like make there be more business for the, I don't know. It's like how a lot of food companies stock doesn't change that much year to year. A lot of them do, but a lot of the ones that are more processed food, like Kraft is an example. The stock price is often relatively stable because they just make these regular products that have relatively long shelf life that just kind of sit there and get passively bought. There isn't really a reason to change how much of them you buy, except for larger, more longer term market trends like people eating more natural foods or whatever. And even then, Kraft might react, innovate, make more of those products. I think coffins are exactly the same as Kraft products, especially macaroni and cheese. What is that box but a coffin for the liver, for the digestion, for your cholesterol? So yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure there's much to worry about here. No. Now, do I trust anyone anyway? No. So, can you trust the nurse whose husband sells coffins? No, but their jobs are irrelevant. I just don't trust people. So I don't know. I think you learn a lot about a person just by how they would respond to these questions. If you were an enterprising talent scout for a certain type of intelligence work, let's just say, this would be a good type of test to give someone because the thing you gain isn't really the answer itself. A lot of them are like sort of obvious. The gimmick of the question is kind of obvious. And if it isn't, I mean, for goodness sakes, what, were we born yesterday? Like, forget it. But then, you know, how they respond or how they react. Do they think that the more advanced answer is itself also obvious? Are they too arrogant about the way they present that answer? Maybe you thought I was. I didn't mean to be, but maybe I subconsciously was. I'm trying to relax and do this parlay, because I think that's the only point. How much extra time do they leave? Do they use all of their time to provide more of an answer, or do they try to get it in quick? Do they consider being concise to be a virtue? And I do. So we're going to stop the clock, even though I have 3 minutes left, and read Yatogami's answer to question 3. The potential conflict of interest between a caretaker, such as a nurse, and a coffin salesperson ought to be weighed against the suspicion that would arise from any sudden deterioration of the caretaker's wards. If the sudden surrounding culture is one that values professional responsibility, then it's fair to give the nurse the benefit of the doubt until there's reason to think otherwise. However, no mention is made of one's relationship to the nurse. Anyone not under the nurse's care has no reason to suspect them of being more untrustworthy than any other person. That's true. Another thing I thought was interesting is that the idea of a nurse, or the station of these jobs, is also relative. The husband may not be in a position where for that line of work they really have the authority. Do they own the coffin selling business? You could go further into it that way, of course. But you make a good point that I didn't focus on as much, about how the nurse's job would be they'd be considered less successful. So if they're a couple whose financial stability is united, it would at the very least be a balancing act. It's not entirely clear that there is a benefit to the couple overall for the husband's business to be more successful and then the nurse's business to be more or less successful. Another very minor testing point, this could just be semantics, but nurse is often considered to imply a female person, but it doesn't. Like, you can be a male nurse. And it would be interesting to see when subjects answered this question if they did or did not assume that. I have been known to, unless I'm told otherwise, I try to remove gender. I think it's better to give people an open-ended identity they can then specify rather than specifying for them and then they don't want that specification. It's not good to erase gender if people have decided they want it, but if it isn't there, I don't think it's good to add it. And that's something that would come out in how you answered these questions. I don't do that very consciously anymore because I'm just used to it. I call people they usually by default, but that would be something you'd learn about someone when answering these kinds of questions this way. What else is there to say, really? I had fun with this parlay. It's very interesting, not so much exactly what you answer to the question. If these questions were about the answer, to be blunt, I think they're mostly too obvious for that to be a noteworthy point. But it's quite interesting to consider the way in which certain biases come out in a person. Like, I'm much more interested in the point about relative cleanliness and things not being absolute, question 2, than I am in question 1, where like black and white being certain phenomenons of optics and it's not exactly the same as the color, and color can be multiple things. Like, that's something I'm well versed in, but it's a little bit less interesting to me. So I spent more time on question 2, whereas you spent a lot less time on question 2, Yatogami. Well, I guess I don't know you spent less time, but you get my point. That's interesting, seeing some mental biases. Again, talking about like the logistically, like, is it that would make you distrustworthy, but if you think about it, does the husband really gain anything in the long run here? I don't know. Also, how much does this society pay for these jobs? You know, does coffin selling make much money? I think people generally, if we were to guess how much money a nurse and a coffin salesperson make, most of us would probably guess worse about the coffin salesperson's income. That's odd, you know? So I'm not sure what to do with that. But very interesting, a lot of fun. It's entertaining to me to see, how do you approach like these questions this way? Now, of course, we're going to finish with some meta discussion. Why does it give certain amounts of marks for each question? Is it just being awkward? Is it just awkwardly worded? It says each question carries 10 marks, but then each question says 10 marks after it. Why? Why is this necessary? To remind you that there's a score or a point? To to give you the suggestion that it doesn't matter what you answer and it's just 10 marks no matter what? Why does it say you're free to use the calculator? Is this meant to be a parody of this kind of test? Is this a real example of this kind of test? What's up with special paper 6? Are there 5 others? Are there more others? Is this meant to be a bunch of details for you to focus on? Like, so you get distracted by that? You don't have to worry about that? Not turning in the paper until you're told to do so seems noteworthy to me. I think that what that does from a psychological perspective is it prevents the person who can answer quickly from not answering more fully, because there isn't as much of an incentive to turn the paper in psychologically. You don't feel like you're done sooner. There is no done sooner. They decide when you're done. You have 15 minutes. So you're just meant to budget time and do whatever you would do. If you still don't spend more time on the thing, that maybe says more about you. Again, I'm convinced this is a covert personality test, although personally, I don't think, maybe I'm too on guard for this kind of thing, but I don't think it's very, very covert. And there are little details like being free to use a calculator where it's like, shouldn't we? Maybe that itself is a test. Like, do you take out a calculator? Like, no, get out of here. Should we find a way to use a calculator? I calculate the financial viability of the husband's coffin salesperson business. But very interesting. I find these types of, it shows a lot about you, but we do it indirectly. I find that kind of stuff pretty interesting. I think it's often deeply flawed, like the devil's in the details for a lot of these, but there are definitely some tricks, like avoiding some biases, kind of scrubbing the data collection in such a way that you don't set off people's bias to turn it in early, or what, you get the idea. Cool. It was fun. I hope that was an approach that you found fun. Yeah, is this real? Also, somebody's attached a thread about sinks. Is this a separate parlay question, or is this attached to this? All right. Anyway, thanks for the question. I'll have to investigate the sync issue separately. But what you think about each of these is interesting, very much like how some of the more open-ended parlay previously, the Banana Loaf and the Unsatisfaction series of animations, are open-ended, and so it maybe says a lot about the person, how they choose to respond. Do they use it as a time to be negative about people's vapid ways of relating to each other? Do they use it as a time to evoke the universal nature of the human experience? I did both. And I think those are very me things to do. I do care about those things a lot. That's predictable for me, given that I'm me and I know me. So I enjoy this kind of thing personally. Hiding something like that, being covert with this kind of thing, you could design something more covert to fiddle around with what reaction you get out of me, which is a way that people I don't think have used Parley that directly in the past, but this one feels like it. It begs the question, what could possibly be the point of this if it isn't to reveal things like that? And if they didn't want people who would suggest overly complicated personality test conspiracy theories, well, they've got me marked. Thanks for the question.